Thank you for joining in today. So today I'm going to be answering a few questions that we got from the email so that clarify a few of the things, topics that I didn't get. So I'm just going to start with that. And as I'm going, if you have any additional questions, go ahead and put them in the chat box if you need more clarification. That way I can cover it and further explain if I need to, if I miss something. I'll try to keep up with the chat box. If I miss it or it seems like I've skipped it and I'm not getting to that question, I keep asking other questions. Maybe type it in again, just help me keep track. Okay, so the first question is actually, this one's from Molly. And so apparently you had successfully changed out your rim pads. So that's awesome. But then you said that you had you forgot to notice what gear it was in. And ever since, the chain's been rubbing on the front derailleur. When you take out your wheel at any point, your rear wheel, then once you put it back in, it should not matter what gear you're in, and it shouldn't change the alignment of the derailleurs, unless up here on the bicycle, there are certain, like this guy, if you happen to bump this, but you said it was on the front one, and there's not one back here on most bikes. If this is bumped, that's your barrel adjuster, then that would make the adjustments off, but just taking your wheel out and putting it back in shouldn't make any adjustments off. It's easier to get your wheel out if you're in the hardest gear down here, because there's less tension on the chain. So you should be able, like I've got my trainer skewer in, not my zip skewer. You should be able to just drop your wheel out, and then, you know, you can put it back in and it shouldn't matter like what gear. You can push the derailleur back like this to help get it out of the way when you're putting your wheel in, and then I'll put it in a different gear. And so you can see it's a little bit more trouble because it's wanting to push it back into the gear that it's in. But it's also better if you do this on the ground, because that way you get the pressure from the ground helping you to push your bike in. You also up here can release your brake to spread that apart, so you've got more space. You push it up in there. And then the thing is that when you put your wheel in, you might think that it's straight, but it's actually not. So Ty, come over here, have my cameraman, which is my son, help. The wheel is not straight in the bike. You also want to remember, tighten your brake levers back. This is really important, and this will cause your shifting to not work properly. So again, the best thing to do is use gravity. Let gravity help you. So you want to drop it down and use the weight of gravity, and make sure and look down in there. And so if it's a little more to one side, it's not going to be in there straight. Sometimes you might have to actually hold the wheel in there, and then make sure your skewer is good and tight. So there we go. You just look and make sure it's all aligned. And then even if you're not in the right gear, you just spin your wheel and it'll go back into the correct gear. And so yeah, anytime you take your wheel out and put it back in, it should not affect how your derailleurs shift at all. So check and see if your wheel has just been a little off, and if it continues to rub, then maybe it needed an adjustment from the beginning. So that might be something to look at. Some also have multiple, the shifters have like multiple gears in the front derailleur, even though there's not multiple, so it might shift. It's called a trim, and so it feels like it clicks again, but it's not going into another gear. It's just it's a high tune shift where you can shift further into a gear or back a little bit just so you've got a good, nice, tight alignment with the chain. So if it's rubbing, try that, try the wheel, then try the shifting, make sure that it's just not an adjustment that needs to be done. Again, if it keeps rubbing, then yeah, you might want to take it in and get the derailleur adjusted. So for the next question, if there's any more clarification on that, let me know. Hacks for when a seat clamp breaks. What do you do? What can be used to hold the seat post up to finish the ride? So there are several different kinds of seat posts out there. You know, my bike doesn't have, the clamp is built into the frame, and there's screws that you have with, you tighten it with the Allen wrench and it presses it up against. So I'll start with the more expensive bikes are set up like this. The lower end road bikes are not. So I'll go over both. With my bike, I had issue with my seat would slip down there for a minute. And it's all carbon. The thing about carbon is you have to be super careful to not over tighten your screws. Again, this is where you absolutely need a multi-tool with you on a ride to fix this. If I hadn't had a multi-tool, then I would have been sitting pretty low the whole ride. So you can tighten it up, make sure not to tighten it too much, because it just, you know, you don't want to crack your carbon. Another thing that you should do when you get back, like if that happens more than once, then usually what that means is you don't have enough carbon paste on your seat post. So for every carbon bike, every expensive carbon bike, for the seat post is usually carbon, the frame's carbon. There's a special paste that we have at bike shops that we put on inside the bike frame, and we put the seat down in it, and it's called carbon fiber grip. And that's just to help hold that seat in place and keep it from sliding. Because if you actually look down in the frame, you're kind of like, how does these two little screws hold the seat post with all my weight on it? But so yeah, the carbon paste probably needs some more of that. That's what my bike needed. It kept slipping. Like after 3 rides, I was finally like, okay, it's time to go to the shop and put some more of that stuff in, fix the problem. Also, vibration can cause your screws to loosen. So there is a product we use, Loctite, and we can put them, you take the little screws out, put just a little bit on the screws, and then put them back in, and it's going to help hold everything in place so that the vibration doesn't vibrate the screws out, as well as the fiber grip. The carbon fiber grip helps hold the seat post in the frame. So that's carbon expensive frames. So aluminum frames usually have some type of clamp around the seat post. This is a quick release seat post clamp. And the thing about seat post clamps like this, they come in multiple sizes. So this has happened before where this has been over tightened and this breaks. So you have a quick release like this, but then some of them have a bolt where you have to loosen it with an Allen wrench. They're both same purpose. This one's just a little bit easier. More expensive bikes are going to have a bolt just so that people can't steal your seat. On this, if it cracks or if you start to see a crack, then you need to take this thing off, and it pops right off of the frame. It has a little catch in there. So it sits on there and then squeezes against the seat post. So you'll want to take your actual one into the bike shop and get a new one, because like I said, they're all different sizes. I've had people walk into the shop and say, I need a new seat thingy. And I'm just like, okay, tell me a little bit about it. Do you have your bike? And they have nothing. And so there's no way that I can give them anything because these come in such a multitude of sizes. If it breaks while you're on a ride, if it's an aluminum frame, the way that you can finish the ride is, I mean, it's kind of tricky. It's kind of iffy. I'd actually talked about Millie with this for a minute. She said, what about zip ties? If you had a really thick, heavy duty zip tie, that possibly could help, but the plastic of it, I don't think that it could hold the weight, but it's certainly worth trying. You could take a zip tie with you on a ride, put it in your bag. But I have never seen one of these actually break on a ride. They're usually pretty durable. Just make sure that you're not over tightening them again. And sometimes they have, like if it has an Allen, not a quick release like this, if it has Allen bolts, then it sometimes tell you how many Newton meters to tighten it to. And if you can, there's a tool called a torque wrench that fits all the Allen sizes on it, and you can set your torque wrench to be able to tighten it to whatever that torque is. If you are really into fiddling with your bike and you really want to be able to take care of it yourself and really learn all this stuff, then especially if you have a carbon frame bike, you absolutely want to get a torque wrench, because you just don't know how tight or how loose you are tightening those bolts. And to be able to properly take care of your bike and not crack your carbon and not crack your bolts or strip the bolts, then you want to make sure that you're tightening them to the proper Newton meter. And all bikes around the bolts will show like how much Newton meters to be able to tighten it to. So like here on my stem, these bolts are 5 Newton meters. So I'm only supposed to tighten these bolts to that. Now, Pinarello, I love them so much, but every single bolt is different, as well as different sizes and as well as a different tool. So you need a multitude of tools. Find out what you need. Find out if you need a star. So they're called the T9 tools, and it looks just like this. Looks just like an Allen wrench, but it's actually, these parts are stars. This is just an Allen, but usually the tool is a green color, just so that you know, hey, this is different. So make sure what all bolts you have. Make sure you're not trying. So sometimes this could be a star. Make sure that you're not putting a star into an Allen. Make sure you're not putting an Allen into a star, because you're going to strip it and then you're going to have to need a new bolt. And that's going to be a pain to try to find the exact same bolt, because they're all different sizes, all different lengths, all different everything. So yeah, that's one trick. You could try zip tie, but just the main thing is make sure that you're not over tightening your bolts so that it doesn't crack. Even with this, this tightens when you spin it, it loosens when you spin it. If you are closing it and you have to use all your pressure and all your strength, too tight, loosen it up. You don't want it to crack. It is really hard to crack those, but hopefully that helps. Are there any more questions about the seat posts? Have y'all had any trouble? If you have, then let me know what it is, and then I can help try to guide you through that. So the next one, mounting and dismounting pedals. So there is a special tool, a pedal wrench, that you can use for pedals. You don't have to have that. A lot of times, like mine, the back of them, it takes an Allen wrench, and you just put it in there. It's usually a number 8. And so that's not going to be on a multi-tool. It's a little too big. I think this is a 6. Yeah, wait. Yep, that's a 6. So a multi-tool usually doesn't go up to an 8, but you can put it in there. And to get your pedals off, you're going to go backwards on both sides. So this one, you're going to go backwards. And pedals are threaded different. The reason for that is so that when you're pedaling and spinning, that you're not going to unthread the pedal. The forward motion is actually the tightening motion of the pedal as well, so that when you're moving forward, it's not going to work itself out and come unscrewed. So that's why pedals are screwed in differently. Each side, it's not righty-tighty for both of them. So if you're wanting to tighten your pedals, you're going to go forward. Another tool that you can use is a crescent wrench. So you don't have to go out and buy the special pedal wrench tool. You can just use the crescent wrench. So one thing, when you're tightening it, you can hold your wheel and push forward, and you want to use a lot of weight and push it forward. If you're loosening it, again, you're going to go backwards. You can reach around, hold the other crank and go backwards on it, and you should be able to loosen it. And see how I'm spinning it backwards to loosen it. Now, do you want to lube these every single time you take them in and out? You don't necessarily have to. You don't want too much lube, but you do want lube on them. Mine are a little dry. They could use some. So that's one thing you want to get. Make sure that you have. If you're taking your pedals on and off, you want to keep them lubed, because if you don't keep them lubed, they will rust through all the water and stuff that you go through, riding conditions, cold, sweat, you're sweating on your pedals. Sweat rusts metal on your bike like crazy. So Park Tools makes a lube. It's Polylube 1000, and it's also called PPL-1. They have interesting names for their tools. Basically, it's the initials of whatever the name of the tool is. So PPL-1. And so again, to tighten it, you know, you move it forward. So it's going forward on the bike like it's spinning. Also, so important, there is a left pedal and a right pedal. You cannot get them mixed. If you get them mixed, you're going to strip your crank and you're going to strip your pedal. So it's so important to make sure that you have the right pedal in the right crank. So there's two ways to tell like which is which. So again, going backwards to loosen it. Pedals are all different. Some of them are very obvious, and it says L for left, R for right side. But if they don't, see, mine are real obvious. There's the L for the left one. And some of them on the left pedal, only ever the left pedal, have notches in it. So there's little lines in the pedal on this part of the pedal. And that is what is going to tell you that is the left pedal. Usually if you have two pedals, there's no words, there's no letters. If there's markings on one pedal, that's your left pedal. So you always can recognize your left from your right from your left pedal, because that's always going to be the one that's marked. So you look for those lines, you look for the special markings, and then you put it in. And again, you go forward, you tighten it forward. It's funny because in the shop, you know, we work on bikes this way. And if you get me on the opposite side of the bike trying to do everything, like even tightening a pedal, I'm like, oh, what am I doing? This isn't normal. So moving forward, so you just spin it in, and then to tighten it, grab the wheel, and you can use the frame to kind of steady you, pull it forward to get it good and tight. You don't want a loose pedal, but again, that's why they're threaded differently in the way that they are, is so that while you're spinning, you're actually tightening it and you can't loosen it and it shouldn't fall out. Don't over grease your pedals. You don't need a ton of grease on them, because then it's too lubed, it can work itself out. But you do, like I use a paintbrush on mine. So I dab it in the lube and I brush it on, and then use my finger to smooth it over and then put it in the bike. And that way it's not like totally gunked. You don't want to dip it. You want to smooth it over so that you're also kind of wiping off some of that excess grease on your pedal. But yeah, definitely make sure that you lube it every once in a while if you're taking them on and off quite often, because of the rust factor. It'll seize up in your crank, and we've had pedals that we couldn't get out. Like they just absolutely were just completely seized. The threads were seized together because of all the sweat, mostly because of all the sweat that was on this bike. And so he had to buy a new crank, because he would take his pedals in and out and just didn't lube them, didn't take care of them, put it in without any lube. So lube's really important for your bolts. Okay, so here's some questions. Do you need special lube? So the lube is, what I recommend we use in the shop is the PPL-1 from Park Tools. It's kind of thick. There's two different kinds really. One's white and one's green. Either one's good. I think that the PPL one is green. You want it to be a thicker lube. So something that's like liquidy, like chain lube, won't work. That's not the same type. That, anything liquidy is for bearing so that it will roll smoother. This is, it's thick. It's a grease just to keep it from, it's like a protecting coating to keep it from rusting, to help it go in smoother, but to also mostly just protect it from grinding the metal against the metal. You want something thicker. This is Tri-Flow. This is a great product for other parts of the bike. This is not for your lube. If your pedal is stuck, seized in your crank, this Tri-Flow is something that would be good to loosen it. It kind of gets in there, and anytime we've had a bolt that has been seized in, we use this stuff to try to, it just really works its way down in there, and it'll help us to be able to loosen stuff whenever we are having trouble being able to do it with just our hands and tools. But you want to clean that off and then put the thick grease on the pedal. Is there a typical lifespan of a pedal? Does it really depend on the type of pedal? So that depends on a multitude of things. So my pedals actually are about 5 years old, and they're still great. Mine are speed plays. It's more of the cleat on the shoe that can wear out, because walking on it will wear it down. And I have a pair of shoes that my cleats are so worn down that I've worn the screw head completely down, so I can't even stick a screwdriver in there to be able to get them off. And so those stay on that shoe. They still work, but if you have trouble with a pedal clipping in and out, sometimes it can get rusted. It depends on weather. It depends on if you're stepping in rocks and they're getting in your cleats and then you're clipping in. And like there was one time I had stepped in some really gritty sand, but it was like thick little teeny tiny pebbles, but it got wedged into my cleat of my shoe, and then clipping into my pedal, it wore it out. And so, if you're not keeping your stuff clean, if it's dirty, mountain bikes would see more of that, but that's why the mountain bike clips are a little bit different. They're more prepared for getting dirty, getting grime in them. But there is not a typical lifespan of a pedal. It just matters how you ride, how hard you ride, what kind of equipment that you're using. Plastic wears out super fast. So if it doesn't have some kind of metal contact, then it's going to wear, the lifespan is going to be a lot less. So let's see, on your cleats, there are some pedals that have a plastic connector. I think it's some Shimano's speed, let's see, there's Look, it's the ones that are the triangle, and they can wear out faster if they have more plastic on it. That's why it's good to spend a little bit more money, buy a good pedal that is mostly a metal contact with a metal cleat, so that way it can last longer, because the plastic, if it's dragged, anything, just the clipping in and out on plastic will wear it down. And that's why my pedals are mostly plastic, but the part where I clip into, in and out of, is metal. And so that's just, it's going to take forever to wear that out. Okay. All right. And then let's see. Shoe, looking at tightening. Okay, covered that. So if there's any more quick questions about pedals, then I'll answer those real quick, but I'm going to go ahead and move on. So now, what are the best practices to cleaning a bike? Where should you start? The chain or the frame or the wheels? What do you do with the disc brakes? That's important. Do you leave the wheels on while washing? Take the wheels off? Is it okay to get water inside the disc pads when the wheels are off? Okay, so there's two ways to wash a bike. One can be you use a spray cleaner, and I really like Finish Line has this liquid that's pink, and it can really shine the bike. Muck Off also has and it's called a bike cleaner. It's pink, and those two work great, especially if you have a polished shine bike. You wipe it down and it can really get your bike good and clean. Right now, my bike's not super dirty. It is dirty, but to clean it, that's all I would need is a rag and then that spray. And you spray the frame and then wipe it off. And then you can clean the chain with, if you have a good chain lube. These are two that we use in our shop. This is my favorite go-to is Rock and Roll Gold. There's different ones. There's gold, there's blue, there's red. They have different purposes. The blue is more for mountain bikes. It's more for like being in super dusty areas. This one is good for road bikes, the gold. It doesn't collect a lot of dust. And you also, when you're putting lube on your chain, you want to wipe it off. Like you can't wipe it off enough. The point of the lube for the chain is to get down inside the bearings, not to be on the outside of the chain. So this stuff also not only lubes the bearings, but it also cleans the chain. So you can just get a dry rag, put that on there and clean the chain. And like in this instance, you would cover it with the lube and then hold the rag down here and just spin backwards to clean this part. And then you can take your spray cleaner and then, spray it on the frame. You can spray it on your wheels and just wipe it all clean, get your spokes clean. So that's the easiest way if your bike's not super, super dirty. But there are times where that's not enough. Your bike is just absolutely gross. It's been a rainy day and you're coming in, it's covered in dirt and grime and you have to wash it. And whenever we do a major tune-up at the shop, we actually usually wash the bike off. So we put it up in a stand like this outside. We get a bucket, a 5-gallon bucket, and we do a mixture of Dawn dish soap with water. And we put it in our bucket. We have our cleaning stuff in the bucket. The cleaning stuff that you'd want to use is you want either a wash rag or soft bristle brush, because you don't want anything super hard or abrasive on your frame. And then for cleaning this area, you want to use a stiffer brush. And we do use a degreaser on this sometimes if it's super duper greasy. It's orange. It's I think it's called actually Big Orange or something like that. You can also buy from a bike shop chain degreasers, and it's meant for that, so you're getting the right stuff. And again, Muck Off is one of my favorite brands. They have a lot of really good products for maintaining your bike. I really like some of their chain lubes too. I wish that our shop carried more of them, but our shop doesn't carry a lot of it. But I'll go get my own sometimes. We carry some, I'll go get it and I'll use it on the bikes that I'm working on. So with the degreaser though, this is just for a manual bicycle. You don't want to use a degreaser, that type. You don't want to spray this down on anything that's electronic. So what you would do to best clean the bike, I'll go back before I get into that. The best way to do it is go ahead and take your wheels out, because there's parts in the frame that you just cannot get to, like right down here, especially. You know, you can't get to that, and a lot of dirt can get in there. Same with in here in the brakes. So it's best to just go ahead and take your wheels out, set them to the side. You can wash them separate, and then, you know, you scrub the frame down and get that all good and washed. While the wheel's out of the bike, you know, you can work on the chain's just going to be hanging there, but you can take your wheel and then you can scrub the cassette and get it good and clean. A quick wash, you can leave the wheels in. With a wash rag, you can kind of get in between those areas. But if you really, really want to do a fine-tuned cleaning, you want to take the wheels out so that you can get to all this. You also want to make sure and move your fork around, because see how there's dirt right there? And that wouldn't have been gotten if you didn't move it around, because it's protected under there. So, you know, make sure and just pay attention to detail. And soapy water, Dawn dish soap. It doesn't hurt the frame, it doesn't hurt the cables, but the thing is that after you wash your bike, so you can wet it down, get your rags, scrub your bike clean, rinse it off real good. And think about it, when you're riding on the road, if you're in the rain, your bike's getting wet. It's okay for your bike to get wet, but you have to make sure and lube everything. Do not scrub in here. So don't open your shifters and scrub in those, because those have to stay lubed. You'll scrub the oil out and then you'll dry out and it'll rust. So just keep them closed and, you know, wipe it down if you need to, but definitely don't get in here and start scrubbing with any kind of solvent or dish soap. Wipe it off with a rag, just a clean rag if you need to. So you can see I just wiped it. It's a little dirty. Don't get your scrub brush and scrub inside of there. So that's for your manual shifting. You know, also you want to wipe it off, dry it off, so there's not water spots on it. After you're done washing it, lube your chain. Make sure you lube it real well and then clean it off again, dry it off, get all the excess oil off. So when you're riding down the road, dust doesn't collect on the chain. That makes your chain super dirty. It wears it out faster because the grime gets inside the bearings. We go over the cable and housing with this tri-flow that I spoke of before. It has a little plastic nozzle type thing that you stick in there to help you get into tight spots. But this is what we use to stick down inside to help lube the cables whenever we can't get to something. Usually, like on a major tune-up, we loosen everything. Don't do this, but we loosen all the cables. We tip the housing upside down, put this down in there to help that. Never, ever, 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 never take your bike to a bike wash or a car wash. Do not ever use a pressure sprayer to wash your bike, because that can ruin it. It can ruin all the bearings inside. It's too much pressure for your bike. Your bike is delicate. Even if it didn't cost that much, it's steel frame, whatever, it's still not okay. It still has bearings inside, and the pressure sprayer is just too much for the paint. It's too much for the bearings. So don't ever use a pressure sprayer on your bike. Just a water hose is plenty. So now for the electronic shifting. Hang on, super beginning question. Let me answer this real quick. It seems there's a lot of stuff sold in different versions for mountain bikes versus road bikes. If you have a gravel bike, should you treat it more like a road bike or a mountain bike because of the extra dust and grit? Really good question. As far as the chain goes, you're going to want to buy stuff that's for a mountain bike, because you are in a lot more dust. So the like if you're buying the rock and roll, you'd want to get the rock and roll blue, because it's meant for more dusty conditions. As far as like the gearing, the shifting and everything goes, you know, it's more like a road bike. But as far as keeping it clean, your pedals, everything like that, you generally want to get, some people have the same, like this is a road bike setup, and there are some people that do put that on their gravel bike, and it's okay. But when you're walking around, the shoes are different on a mountain bike than they are on a road bike. So mountain bike shoes are typically like shoes. They have a sole, and the cleat actually is up inside your sole. And so that way, it's also the same shoes basically that you could use for a spin class. It's so you can walk around and you're not tapping click, click, click on your actual clips. So I would say for gravel, what I personally would do is I would get, I like Shimano Speed Plates. That's what's on my, or not Speed Plates, sorry, that's what this is. The Speedies, the Shimano's. That's what I would get for my gravel bike. And I'm actually, if racing ever starts up again, hopefully this fall, I'm going to race cross. And so with cross, a cross bike is basically a gravel bike. And I'm going to use my mountain bike shoes, and I'm going to have my mountain bike pedals on my bike. That way, when you clip out, you can walk, especially on gravel. You know, you've got those soles and you're not tearing your clips up. So hopefully answered that. And as far as, yeah, the dust goes, for your chain, treat it like a mountain bike. It's dusty, super dusty. Okay, so washing, and a gravel bike, you're going to want to definitely wash with a water hose. On your electronic shifting, this you do have to be a little bit more careful with, just because you don't want to get the water inside the wires. Technically speaking, it's supposed to be waterproof, more water resistant. You want to take your batteries out, and you should have battery blocks that came with it. And so before you wash the bike, you're going to want to take your batteries out and put those battery blocks in so that the water's not getting down in that. If it's a scenario where you can wash it with the spray, like the chemical stuff, and just spray it down and wipe it with a rag, that's usually preferable. To clean the group set, to clean all this, there is a special cleaner that is made specifically for e-shifting. And let's see, what is it called? It's e-shift group set cleaner. That's it, e-shift group set cleaner. And that's best. It's a finish line product, and you spray it and you can clean your derailleurs and everything with it. It's the best way to do that. That way you're not getting soap and water scrubbing all that. It cleans it real well. The frame that you can still do with the Dawn dish soap and clean it just like I described how I would clean my bike with the cables. But then when it comes to cleaning your actual shifters, you'll want to use that e-shifter product, a rag, kind of get through it. You don't want to use any kind of solvents on it. You don't want anything electronic unplugged, because then you can get water inside of that wire, and then that's what's going to break your e-shifting and your whole set. It'll short it out. So then as far as disc brakes go, again, think about when you're out on the road, it's raining, water gets in it. Water's not going to hurt your disc brakes. It's not going to hurt your pads. What causes issues with the brake pads is chemicals, is the oils like from the road. And a lot of times if you ride on a rainy day, there's been a lot of cars, then you know the oils get up in your brake pads. That's when you start getting noise. So you want to, that's when you have to like clean it, because there's contaminants on it. And that's where I taught you in the last class, where you take it off and you can use sandpaper, get it off a little bit. So one thing to do when you're washing it is, you know, take your wheels out. You can get a little plastic baggie and a rubber band and just put it around the brake caliper if your wheels are out. So that way it kind of protects it from getting any kind of soap in there. It doesn't, just because you get a little bit of soapy water in there, as long as you wash it off, it's generally okay. Wash it off before you use it, before you try to squeeze the brake. Definitely, again, don't ever, ever, ever squeeze your brake levers when your wheel is out of the frame on a disc brake, because you will mess the calipers up. It closes them in too tight, and then you'll have to spread them apart again and reset them. But yeah, if you want to take that extra step, now at the bike shop, I don't cover the brakes or the brake calipers with a plastic bag. I wash it, I just make sure, and I don't scrub the brake calipers with the soapy water. I get everywhere else around to get the wheels, get everything, but I avoid purposefully scrubbing those calipers, just so that I'm not scrubbing any kind of solvent onto those brake pads to cause any issues. And then you rinse the bike off really well with water. Water does not hurt it at all. You can sit there and spray it and spray it and spray it. Doesn't hurt it. It's fine. Let's see. For anyone that didn't see the last class, hang on just a second. You showed a special tool for separating the brake pads. So could you use a large screwdriver or something like that if you don't have that tool? Yes, sometimes you can. I mean, you could even, on your brake levers, if you get a tire lever through, you know, that side of it would work. The brake lever, the spreader, it looks basically like this. It's really thin on top, and then it gets wider, and that's just so you can push it up in there between the brake pads so that you can spread them apart. So yeah, you could use a screwdriver and do one side at a time. There's all kinds of little hacks like that you could use to try to spread it apart. And then you can try to reset it as well. Again, hopefully just spreading it apart will be enough, but sometimes you're going to have to, you know, make sure after you've spread it, you put the wheel back in, spinning it, you squeeze the brake, make sure it's not dragging anywhere. If it is continually and it wasn't before, then you might need to try to spread a little bit more, pushing against it, because the hydraulics, there's these little round things that are behind the brake pad, and that's what is pushing the brake pad closer to the rim, and you're just basically trying to push those back away and set them in place by pushing them so that they aren't in too far, rubbing the brake. So hopefully that will help you with that. Okay, that is pretty much it with washing the bike. If there's any other questions, then let me know. Definitely try not to get it in any of your electronics, any water. Make sure again that it's all closed. If it's closed, it should be fine because it's made to be water resistant. Just like when you ride through the rain, wet street, you're okay. Okay, so then next, let's talk about bottom brackets. This is very tricky. So for a bottom bracket, don't work on it. Take it to a shop and let them work on it. There are too many bottom brackets. There are too many aspects about the bottom bracket, special tools needed, and every bike is so different that if something is wrong with your bottom bracket, then take it to a mechanic so that they have the right tools, they have the right bottom bracket, they can make sure and diagnose the correct problem. So bottom brackets can make noise, a lot of noise. And so what I'll do with bottom brackets is help you to look for certain things that are wrong, to help you know, okay, something's wrong with my bottom bracket, I need to take it in. So there's certain noises that you can hear. So you'll hear creaking, popping, grinding. So those are, of course, the main noises. The thing about the popping is it actually may not be coming from your bottom bracket. There's been a lot of rides I've been on with someone and there's this popping and they're like, what is that? There's something wrong with my bottom bracket. And I check it out for them. Nothing's wrong with their bottom bracket. What's actually wrong is their seat post is loose. And so their seat post is popping and cracking. So that's one thing. If you hear a popping and cracking noise, first make sure that your seat post is tight, that it's not that. One way to check while you're riding is if you stand up and the noise goes away, you're not sitting down on your seat post, then it's your seat post. But if it doesn't, and it really is down in the bottom bracket, that could mean a few things. It could mean that your bottom bracket is loose or something inside is broken. Press fit. So there's different kinds of bottom brackets. There's a press fit that where it goes through the frame and we take the special tool that presses it into the frame and it sits there with just pressure. And then there's a threaded bottom bracket where it goes in and they actually thread into each other. And again, there's different kinds of threads. There's Italian threaded bottom brackets and there's American threaded bottom brackets. But they're threaded to where they won't spin loose. So a threaded bottom bracket, it's just like the pedals, it should never spin itself loose. Usually if something's loose, then it's usually going to happen with the press fit bottom bracket. If you can ever get a threaded bottom bracket, then I would professionally recommend that over a press fit, just because we see so many issues with press fit bottom brackets. So if you are having trouble shifting, that's another thing. If you hear this popping and cracking along with the bad shifting, then that definitely can mean that your bottom bracket is loose. And there will also, if you grab your cranks and move them and you're able to wiggle them at all, that's very dangerous. And that means that yes, there's something wrong with your bottom bracket. It's either loose, cracked, broken, something's happened. You need to take it into a shop immediately. Don't ride it any further because you're just going to make it worse. And it can get to where you'll strip other parts of your cranks and then you're going to have to buy all new crankset. And so anytime there's any small issue with a bike, don't let it go, because one small thing can end up costing you hundreds of dollars when it may have only cost less than 100. And so make sure, like a bottom bracket actually doesn't cost that much. I'm trying to think of the last one I helped someone with. I think we were looking at a Chris King, and it was a ceramic bearing bottom bracket. Those tend to be a little bit more expensive. I think it was around $100. I could be wrong about that, but anyways, those are signs to look for if there's popping, cracking. Definitely if your pedals, your cranks are loose and you can wiggle them back and forth like that. You just want to grab both of them and do this number. And if there's any kind of movement or play in it whatsoever, then you definitely need to take it to the shop. It could be something as simple as it just came loose, and so they'll tighten everything up. It could be even a crank arm's loose, but anytime, just make sure and take it to the shop. They've got the right tools. They'll make sure everything's good and tight. The bearings inside of a nice road bike are concealed bearings, so there's different kinds of bearings in there. Some bikes have loose ball bearings, and that's going to be like a less expensive bicycle. That is usually a metal frame, and you don't ever want to pull those apart, because if you do, the balls will go everywhere, because they're literally just sitting in this little carved out section, and they are all loose. They'll fall out. You want to make sure for things like that, if you have a loose bearing, some bearings have the balls inside this little cup, and it's in a ring, and it looks like these little claws that are holding these ball bearings. Bearings like that have to be greased. And if you ever feel like when you're pedaling, and do this with your hands, so it's a little bit more sensitive than your leg. If you feel like there's just something not right while you're pedaling, if you ever feel it like catch a little bit, or like it's not just going smooth, then that usually means that there's something wrong with your bearings. And again, metal frames will usually see this a little bit more because they generally have a different kind of bearing. Not always. Some have the sealed bearing. My bearings are a sealed bearing, and they are encapsulated in these metal rings with a plastic cover. You can't get to the actual balls that are inside, and it's all lubed. Once those go out, you don't take it apart and lube it. You just have to get new bearings, and you can feel them. And if there's ever a little catch, and that's what you're doing this for, is to feel the bearings and see if there's ever a spot that just kind of seems like there's a little bit more resistance, then that means that your bearing is worn out. So that's a few things with bottom brackets. Any kind of noise means it's probably loose, especially if it's a press fit, then it's going to have a tendency to loosen itself a little bit faster. I've never had that problem because mine's an Italian threaded bottom bracket, and you know, I periodically check my bearings. I know that, you know, you have to take your cranks out and everything, and then check your bearings to see just, are they spinning well? Do I need to replace them or not? And again, since you can't, if you don't know how to take your cranks off and put it all back together and get to your bearings, it's fine. Just spin the cranks and see if you can feel it with your hands, because they're more sensitive than your legs would feel it. Okay, any questions about bottom brackets? Anything else for that? Let me know, and I'll definitely answer that. So next, almost through all the questions. What tools would I recommend having at home? What are the essentials? So a set of Allen wrenches that are metric, because everything on a bicycle is metric measurements. You can, you know, if you have a multi-tool, you can use that, but Allen wrenches come in these really nice sets that are a little bit longer, the L shape. You could get you one of those just to keep it home, but definitely have a multi-tool. Usually in most cases, if you don't have those, like I said, a multi-tool will work. I actually don't have one here at my house because I have a multi-tool. If I need anything, I just go up to the shop. But for you guys who don't have that ability, get yourself an Allen wrench set. Make sure it goes up to size 8, and it should. Most of them go through like a 2.5 to an 8. And that's perfect, because that's usually all the bicycle will require. It'll cover every bicycle and all the Allen fixes on it. Look at your bike and make sure what kind of bike that you have. If you don't need the, if you have some bolts that are the star bolts, then make sure you get you a T9 tool. And like I said, the Park Tools, it's green with Park Tools, and it's got all the T Allen wrenches on it, or the T star wrenches on it. So you might need one of those. That's the main ones, along with a screwdriver. So Allen wrenches and screwdrivers are pretty much what you need at home. Chain lube to be able to work on your bike, a tire lever. So those can pretty much fix anything. The more tools are a little bit more advanced. If you have disc brakes, then a little bit of sandpaper. So if you ever have the chemicals built up on your pads, you can sand that off real quick. Rubbing alcohol as well for the disc brakes. So set of wrenches, screwdrivers, chain lube, tire lever, a spare tube for when you ride, and sandpaper, rubbing alcohol. That's basically, those are the tools, because like I showed you with the pedals, you can use an 8 Allen wrench, or you would need a crescent wrench if you don't want to get a pedal wrench. And usually everybody has one of these laying around. Just make sure it's the right size. This one is an American size, it's 5/8, but usually pedals are, it depends on the pedals, but pedals are usually a 15 for a crescent wrench. Some can be smaller, but generally 15 is what you would need. If you have a multi-set, then a multi-set of these, then you're set, you're golden. So yeah, if you're taking your pedals on and off, you can also use one of those, any type of wrench that adjusts or tighten, I mean, you could even use this guy. It wouldn't be perfect, but then also if you have one of those wrenches that has a little screw on it where you can adjust it, it goes in and out, that'll work just fine. And it'll work for any bolt that's on a bike. Again, every bike is different. There's so many different sizes of bolts and Allen bolts on a bike. And so you just need to see what your bike has and then try to make sure that you get whatever tools that is to be able to work on it. And again, so those are your basic ones, have a set of an Allen. So next question is hacks on how to take off a tire when it's flat, it's a clincher, it's so tight, it's so stiff. There have been times where we have just fought with a tire. Some of them are really hard, especially I find this in like alligator skins, the Continentals. That brand for some reason seems to be super tight, really hard to get on, really hard to get off. So let me show you. I mean, really what you have to do, sometimes we'll spray polish, bicycle polish that we use to make the bikes nice and shiny to help us to get it off. Of course, make sure first thing that all of the air is completely out of the tire, because if there is even the slightest bit of air, you're going to get resistance and it's going to be impossible to get this tire off. So make sure that every single bit of it is out. You can squeeze while you're pressing the valve, squeeze the tire to make sure there's no air in it. The best way to do it, we'll either do it just like this, where we put it into our legs and you use the palm of your hands to just really push the tire back to where you can try to fit a tire lever in there, and just, you got to slowly just work your way to pull it off. The same with getting it back on. Sometimes, so say there will be times where the tire is on everywhere except for this one little section, and we will fight with it. And you just have to use, in that little section, use the palm of your hands and just try to roll it with all your strength. Sometimes it helps, like if you have a big round trash can, to set it on top of the trash can so you have something holding the entire wheel up, and so you have something to push, a surface to push against, to just work that. You can also stick the tire lever in there and work it. Let me let the air out and I'll show you the example of that. Baby powder inside, like a lot of tubes can come where they're covered in baby powder. That can be something that helps to make it a little bit more smooth. I've noticed that whenever the tube doesn't have any kind of powder on it, it's really hard. Everything gets really sticky and kind of stuck. But so say, you're right there, you can't get that tire on, and you can't even fit a tire lever in there at all, then you just use the palm of your hand and push it until you can roll it on like that and in. And it's, there's no super special trick other than that. It's muscle. There's been times where it's taken us like 10 minutes or so to get a tire onto a wheel, just because it's so tight. Like we've had to even just make sure, okay, wait a minute, is this tire a 650 instead of the 700? Like what is going on? What is this wheel? But it's just certain brands of tires are just super tight. That's actually one reason why I don't use Continentals, is because I don't like how tight they are on the wheel. I don't feel like it's super necessary to be that tight. I use Vittoras. I really like those. But so any questions about that? Any tips for preventing pinching the tube when putting the tire on? Absolutely. So whenever you've got this, you're ready to go, okay, there's no air in there. If you go around like this with the tire and just kind of check and make sure you don't see a tube sticking out there, you're just kind of pinching it basically and checking, making sure, okay, there's no tube sticking out. You can do it on the other side and just go around. That pinching motion of you pinching the tire kind of helps it to get in place. And then also, if you do see it, you can take your tire lever and try to put it back inside the tire, because you want the tube actually inside the tire, and just go and kind of pinch it all the way around. And you can always use your valve stem as your starting point, your guide to know, okay, yeah, you've gone all the way around. So definitely do that every single time you ever change a tube out. That is just standard procedure. Go through, pinch it, make sure it's not, you know, sticking out just a little bit, because if it is, then you are going to get a pinch flat. All right. So when a hanger gets bent, what do you do? Hangers are very, very fragile. Some will just snap right away if you try to bend them. First thing, make sure never lay your bike down on the side where the chain and the gears and your derailleurs are. You have to lay your bike down, always lay it down on the other side. Sometimes it falls, sometimes you crash over on that side. The derailleur will get bent. Just if it's bent, your shifting's going to be off. That's going to be one way to tell. You can sometimes look at the hanger and you can see, yeah, it got bent when it got hit. You can try to straighten it out, and it depends on the derailleur, but usually, you know, you can stick an Allen wrench in there and you can try to like maneuver it and straighten the hanger out, but I don't recommend that because they are very fragile. If there's a crack in it, it's toast. You have to get a new derailleur hanger. There are so many derailleur hangers that it's really hard to just say, oh yeah, hey, I need a new derailleur hanger. Take your bike into the bike shop. It wouldn't hurt you to have a spare derailleur hanger laying around if it does break. If you're kind of handy, you want to be able to take care of it yourself. If it does crack or break, then it's kind of tricky getting it back on and off. You've got to actually take your whole derailleur off the bike and then reinstall it. You have to take the wheel off and everything. If it's cracked, it's toast. Don't try to use it. Don't try to straighten it. You need a new one. If you try to straighten it, we have to have a special tool to be able to straighten the derailleur hangers. And sometimes they are so bent that you can't straighten them back and they end up breaking while we're trying to straighten them. But it's a fun little tool called a dag. So it's funny, I'll be like, do you have a dag? Can I borrow your dag to straighten this? But put it in, and then it's this really neat tool that you use the wheel and go all the way around the wheel and make sure that it lines up perfectly and it shows us if it's bent or not. So I do not recommend trying to straighten out your derailleur hanger by yourself, because it's so temperamental, and you could crack it, make it worse. But you know, if it's just a little bent, then you can just try to, you know, get an Allen wrench in there if possible and try to pull it to straighten it out whichever way. But then you might overcorrect it. You just never know without that dag tool to be able to determine, okay, is this all the way around completely straight at every single angle? Then you're not going to get it perfectly straight. But yeah, if it cracks, then it doesn't hurt to just carry a spare. But again, you're going to want the bike shop to install it, because it's it can be very tedious. If you want to be handy and you want to install it yourself, then by all means, that's awesome. Just make sure once you get everything installed, it's good and tight, you can shift through the gears properly and it shifts right. If it doesn't, then you might want to take it in and just make sure that everything's done right and okay. All right, so then I got to wrap this up. Recommendation on shifters that accommodate and fine tune small hands. So there are some levers and group sets that are made for small hands, is what it says. So it's a women specific, and I don't ever recommend buying this stuff on your own. Have a shop help guide you and buy it through them. For one, it helps your shop. For two, it gives us jobs and we're able to be there to help you at all times. So definitely support your local shop. I know it can be tempting to buy a lot of this stuff online yourself, but there's been so many issues that have come across from people trying to buy stuff online. They do some research, they watch a lot of YouTube videos, and then they attempt to purchase things online, and then they bring it in to us and they're like, I don't know what's wrong with it. And we're like, well, it's the wrong thing for you, or you put it together wrong and now you broke it, we can't fix it. But for things like this, it's super important to make sure you get the right one and let the shop help you order that. These are for small hands for me. Also, your handlebars, they do make ones that are for women specific handlebars. The difference is going to be right here, so that we can go further in to be able to reach around. I have tiny hands, so I had to make sure that I definitely got the women specific fit. So handlebars are measured for the width of your shoulders, and they should match the width of your shoulders. So you need someone who does bike fits to measure and make sure that you're first buying the right size, and then second, that you make sure and get for small hands, handlebars, so that you can fit your hand right in there. Because others, like for guys, the angle is a little bit different for bigger hands, so that you aren't getting down inside there and being able to reach around and grip that. So my handlebars are actually zip. So Zip offers a female handlebars. Most places do. There's not as much of a variety, unfortunately, for small hands. But it is out there for sure. You've got to just make sure that you are buying the type for small hands. You can't, for these, my Ultegra shifters, it doesn't say anywhere on it that it's for small hands. When you are purchasing it, you have to make sure and know that it is specified for that by the model number. And so again, that's where a bike shop can help you learn which ones that you need, which model you need to be able to order for small hands. So that product is out there. I do recommend it. It makes a difference. It makes your ride more comfortable when you're down in your drops, when you're racing. You want to be able to reach everything very comfortably and very fast, because you just never know what's going to happen. So any questions about anything, because that covers everything, and I have gone over. Any questions at all? Nothing yet. Jess, you still there?
Hello.
There you are.
Hi. Thank you so much. That was so interesting. I'm really bad. I always pinch my tubes. Like, I think I'm on the brush, and then I'm like, oh.
Have you tried that pinching motion ever with the tire?
I will now. It's just like the extra bit of time. I just need to like go around and.
Right. Yeah. It's just simply just going around and squeezing the tire, and then of course looking down in there. And if you see the tube, you can. Some tires you can take your fingers and like push it up inside the tire. If there's not enough, then just use that tire lever to just kind of guide it up in there.
Yeah.
And then that way it's not going to be in between the tire and the rim.
I think I always get so frustrated by the time I've like wrestled with the tire. I'm just like, I'm done, I finished. I think I've just seen a question pop up.
Let's see. Yeah, last time you mentioned we could degrease our chain using a lube that was also a degreaser. But when I asked about this, the shop, they were a bit confused. Did you miss? Okay. So yeah, what I was saying, like this, for example, the Rock and Roll Gold, it does both. It's not a degreaser, but you'll see on a lot of some of the lubes, not a lot, but some, you know, dirt, it leaves your chain super clean. So it will say that it cleans and lubes. And so that's what I meant by it kind of degreases, is that your chain lube is going to help clean. That's why when you put new on and you start cleaning it with your rag, all that black stuff comes off. So just your typical chain lube should be able to clean and degrease it all at the same time, as well as lube it. So yeah, Rock and Roll Gold, that's one of them. This is another one we use in the shop. It's called T9, and see, it says cleans, lubes, and protects. So it repels dirt and dust. It's waterproof. So it's the chain lube itself. It kind of already naturally does that. It cleans, degreases, and lubes your chain all in one. So the best, I'll tell you what, I don't know, when you have a clean chain and then you use a good lube. I almost won a USA Crit Series race after I had just had my chain cleaned with, it was a muck off, and it was like a ceramic lube. I got on my bike and felt like, oh my gosh, like I feel all this power. It's amazing what a clean, good, perfect chain feels like. So yeah, definitely just get you some good chain lube, and that's what I meant by that. Okay, that's it. Some more.
Well, are there any more questions at all? If anyone wants to unmute and ask verbally, that's that's fine too.
You're welcome. Glad I was super helpful.
Cool. Before we let everyone get on with the rest of, or whatever time frame, rest of your day, evening, morning, this will go up on the website as well. So there's a recording of this, if there's anything you want to go back and look at. For anyone who might not have seen it yet, we're doing a challenge in September, which is riding up Mont Ventoux by all 3 routes in one day. It's so good. I've done it twice now, actually, and it's a really cool challenge. Unfortunately, the stats of it, there's something like 14,000 men have recorded to have done it and less than 1,000 women. So we thought it would be a really cool thing to do, to get a group of us. And I think there's 3 spots left. So if that piques your interest at all, take a look at the NGNM website, and there's more details on there. It'll be a really cool trip. I will hopefully be there in one piece after doing the Tour de France. So it would be cool to meet any of you if that's something that sounds cool. And something more close to home, every Wednesday evening we have Swift rides. They're an hour long, social, chatty. So if anyone has got Zwift and fancies joining us on a Wednesday, yeah, they're every Wednesday throughout the summer, through the winter. A really nice place to meet other women cyclists. So yeah, just to finish off, thank you so much, Michelle, for imparting your knowledge. You can find Michelle on Instagram, so I'm sure if you ever have questions, I bet she's happy to help. And yeah, is there anything you want to add, Michelle?
On Instagram and on Facebook, I'm the Mechanic Michelle. And so yeah, if you do need anything, just let me know. Just send me a message and I'd be happy to answer your questions. Thank you guys so much for being a part of this class, or gals, I should say. Thank you for joining in. Definitely spread the word. I'm here to help, and especially love helping females, since we are such a minority in the sport, as well as I'm minority in this career field. So get the word out there. It's awesome. Go ride your bikes, get more people to ride bikes, especially girls. It's a lot of fun. It's awesome. Thank you guys for being a part of this.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Have a lovely day, lovely evening, and I'm sure we'll see each other soon. Thank you, everyone. Bye.